Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and this is our Westchester coronavirus update for Friday, February 19th. I'm joined, as I am each time we do the update, by Ken Jenkins, who's our Deputy County Executive, and our Director of Operations, Joan McDonald, is here today so that she can give us a report on an area that she's been directly involved in here in the county. Joan, Ken, and I are sort of the key three people in the decision-making process of county government, but we have many other people inside that decision circle. And so we're very grateful. I'm personally grateful to have Ken and Joan's leadership to help us get through this crisis as we go day by day by day. We're going to cover some statistics first, and then we'll get into a number of other topics, and we have a couple of non-COVID related topics to cover. Our next update after today will be the standard Monday update that's coming this coming Monday, which is the 22nd of the month, and then we will have next week's second update on Thursday. We always shift whenever there's a holiday, as there was this week, and if there's anything important to announce, we'll do that separately, and if it needs a full update, we'll do a one sooner than that. But we think that the beginning of the week and the end of the week updates make the most amount of sense. When we see you again on Monday, we'll have had the benefit of seeing what happened over the weekend, and that will inform us and try to give you a little more information. First of all, on the basics of the extension of the virus, the spread of the virus, we're working off of the New York State tracker, which provides us the information that we use for these updates, which is also what you see on our dashboard. As of yesterday's numbers, Thursday numbers, the tracker usually isn't updated until 2 or 3 o'clock on a given day, so we won't see Friday's numbers until later in the day. But as of yesterday, Thursday's numbers, we had a total number of active cases of 7,030 individuals that are active with coronavirus infection that we know of. That number generally represents the people that have been tested positive for COVID within the prior 14 days. If they've gone more than 14 days, then they have gone through the system successfully. They've beaten the disease. So the number of active cases fall within that 2-week interval. That number, to give you the comparison as I try to do each week to give you an idea of the trend line, a week ago before that, which would be Thursday, the 11th of February, we had 7,922 active cases, so 900 more active cases roughly. 2 weeks before that, February 4th, we had 9,343 cases, and that's 2,000 plus, almost 2,500 more cases 2 weeks ago. If you go back 3 weeks ago to Thursday, January 28th, we had 11,193 cases, so clearly a drop of 4,000 cases over the last roughly month. And Thursday, January 21st, a little more than that, 11,400 cases. So we've gone from January 21st on a Thursday, 11,400 cases, down to yesterday, 7,000 cases. That is a good trend line. That is a steady trend line of downward turn. Now, we had a slight uptick in Wednesday's numbers and in Thursday's numbers over what they were the prior day. But still, the numbers have been dropping. The Thursday number, which we've just announced, 7,030, is lower than Monday's number, which was 7,100. So basically, the numbers have come down, and we're encouraged by that in terms of active cases. The next number we look at for degree of severity of the people who have active cases, how many of them are hospitalized right now? And the most recent number we have is 403 hospitalizations for COVID. So you can do quick math, 400 plus people hospitalized out of a base of 7,000. You're somewhere in the vicinity of 5%, perhaps a little above 5% hospitalized, maybe closer to 6%, which is a low percentage. In absolute numbers, we're well clear of our hospital capacity of beds, which is in the 2,500 range of hospital beds. 400 hospitalized is a small number compared to that, and that number also is coming down. The prior Thursday comparable numbers, 403 this Thursday, 458 a week ago, 510 2 weeks ago, 559 3 weeks ago, 583 back on January 21st. So we've gone from 583 down to 403. That's almost a drop of 200 people in the hospital in the aggregate, and that would be, if you go back to the base of 583 people, a third less people hospitalized now in the last month. So that, too, is a good sign. In terms of fatalities, we have had 2,041 people as of yesterday who have died from COVID here in Westchester County. That number of fatalities obviously is an accumulative number, and every single one of those individuals is a difficult tragedy for the family that they're involved in. we try to track trends by week in terms of fatalities. So in the week that ended yesterday, 39 people had passed away. The prior week, 54 people passed away. The week before that, 73 people passed away. So in terms of a number and a trend, the number of fatalities per week have been dropping. We're almost at the point where we are half of the population of fatalities than we had 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Obviously, nothing will suffice until we hit zero. And there was a time during the summer where we had weeks of zero, where we had no fatalities. We hope to be able to return to that. That is a combination of how many people get the vaccine and by getting the vaccine do not get the disease, and that will drop the number of cases. And the less people that get the cases, the less people that suffer fatality, hospitalization, and fatality. But I do want to point out, we've talked for quite a while about the spikes that we had that were tied into holidays. And I've made the point before, so I know I'm repeating old news. But almost every public type of event has been canceled. The major public events, the New Rochelle Thanksgiving Day Parade, canceled. The Sleepy Hollow Halloween Parade, canceled. The ball dropping in Renaissance Square here in White Plains, we know that that's right after the Times Square ball dropping in terms of importance to the nation. But in our backyard in White Plains, that was canceled. All kinds of public activities canceled. We had no youth sports going through the fall season. They've started up again now in high schools and so forth. But with all of those public events canceled, meetings, Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis Club meetings, done on Zoom, all kinds of meetings done on Zoom, we had a diminution in the amount of infection until we hit Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving Day, we had, in the aggregate, 1,510 fatalities. In the period of time since Thanksgiving, we now have 2,041 people died. Roughly 500 people died since Thanksgiving, which represents 25% of the total amount of fatalities. 25% of all the people that have died in Westchester County died since Thanksgiving Day, at a time when we had no public events or minimal public events. And so it should tell you very clearly what the correlation is between private activity and private behavior, which we truthfully cannot regulate. We cannot enforce it. Nobody's knocking on your door to see who's sitting around your table for Christmas Day or, what are you doing to celebrate New Year's when the ball drops. We haven't quite yet seen the Super Bowl impact yet. We're concerned now that's what's at hand. But during that period of time, we had a significant spike in the number of fatalities. Now, there are other reasons for the fatalities, certainly. There's comorbidities, there's other factors. But you cannot deny that we've had a rapid increase in the number of fatalities since Thanksgiving Day at a time when we had almost no public activities, but private behavior pursued whatever direction it pursued. And it may be that the people at the party did not die of COVID, but they got COVID and they passed it on to somebody else who was had an underlying illness and then suffered. We don't know that. We do contact tracing, but we don't do it for historical purposes. We do it to try to get people to isolate so we don't spread the disease, not to play detective and research who was in contact with who. But I say that because the numbers are coming down. We're encouraged by the reduction in those numbers. The numbers aren't dropping so dramatically as to make us think that we're in the clear. And we've already been through this once. We saw the numbers drop dramatically in the late spring and into the summer. And while we didn't pop open corks, we were very positively influenced by the fact that we went weeks without fatalities, that we went with minimal hospitalizations. We got the hospitalization number at one point down to about 25 people in the hospital in the whole county, which we felt was a very positive number. The active cases dropped down to under 500 active cases. We're at 7,000 today. That number's 4,000 plus lower than it was a month ago. We had it down to under 500 active cases within a 2-week period, but it came back. So our behavior is critical here. And there are government policies. We're going to talk about some of the things we're trying to do with vaccines in a second. And we certainly continue PPE distribution and hand sanitizer distribution, all those things that we've been doing all along. But the numbers are getting better, but they're not getting better enough for us to drop our guard. And I know just how frustrated everybody is. Not do I just hear it, I feel it myself. I have the same frustrations. I might step out of my car, leave my office, head down to the car, forgot my mask, or touched a doorknob to go into a building, and as I'm going up, I said, I should have hand sanitized, because I don't know what's on my fingertips from having opened the door. Those things are as true to me as they are to you. And all I can tell you is that the numbers are getting better, but the numbers are still embedded with hospitalizations and with fatalities, and we have to do everything we can to try to do this. Now, the race that we're having, obviously, I've said it a number of times, is how fast can you vaccinate people and therefore reduce the spread. And that will be, in theory, the end of the pandemic when we don't have new cases. Can you imagine a day where we had no new cases and we would drop by, 400, 500 active cases as people qualified through? We, as a county government, cannot track all of the vaccines that are given out in Westchester County. We see amounts that are given out to pharmacies. Some of those are coming directly from the state, and now some are going to come directly from the federal government. That isn't part of our specific calculation. When the state establishes a pop-up center, as they did a couple of weeks ago and as they're planning to do this weekend, we understand that there's some locations coming up. I'm going to try to stop by the one in Portchester, at the Portchester Senior Center, just to observe and see what's happening, as I did 2 weeks ago, as Ken did in Yonkers 2 weeks ago. But we don't know what those numbers are. We can't calculate that into vaccination numbers. We get some general information from the state, and then we project to you a general aggregate. But the three locations that we're involved in, we directly run, as a county health department, a county government, the vaccination locations here at the Public Health Clinic in White Plains on Court Street, right up the block from the county office building, downtown White Plains. We've opened that over a month ago. And we have opened, I guess, 2 weeks ago today, the Westchester Community College vaccination site. And we're trying to manage, Joan, this is all Joan McDonald's headache. She'll tell you about it in a minute. She's trying to manage first doses, second doses. We want people to get their second dose the same place they got their first dose. But if we had 1,000 people walk through the door for first doses, those 1,000 people have to come back in for the second doses, and then there's a whole bunch of other people who have to get first doses. So by segmenting locations, we think it's a more manageable situation, since Joan has actually managed state departments, whole departments of state government in New York and also in Connecticut. She's the right person to be able to manage the process for a county government in this case. Just to give you a couple of numbers, Westchester County Center has administered 53,803 vaccinations as of day end yesterday. And they stayed open yesterday, and except for the 2 days of heavy snow in early February, we've got a lot of snow, but the very heaviest snow, the high double digit on Monday the 1st and Tuesday the 2nd of February, they've stayed open throughout since they first opened their doors in January. And they've administered 53,803 vaccinations. That's counting both first and second doses. And our two locations now in the aggregate, because it comes off of an allocation that we get as a county, we don't get the allocation specific for those two locations. We make the division between how much goes to the community college and how much goes to the clinic. We have vaccinated 9,707 delivery of vaccination. And again, a percentage of those are second doses for people that got first doses. So I can't add those numbers up and say this is the total number of people that have been vaccinated. But in the aggregate, between those two locations, we've administered 63,000 doses of vaccine. Now, keep in mind that throughout the course of this pandemic, we have about 102,000 people that have come down with COVID. So we're going to be reaching a point very soon where we will have administered at least one, if not both, doses of vaccine to as many people as we know that got the disease at some point in time. You're roughly talking, in round numbers, about 10% of the Westchester population got the COVID virus and was reported as having it. Any number of people may have gotten it and it was a mild case, didn't report it, didn't get into the system of testing. And we're approaching the point, relatively soon, at which we will have administered as many doses of the vaccine as there have been people that actually got the disease. Obviously, that number has to get up as close to full residency as is possible. We also know there's an issue, which I'm going to address in a few minutes, about people who don't choose to take the vaccine. But for right now, those numbers are rising, and to have 63,000 vaccines out is a positive. Just to give you a comparison, I didn't have these numbers when I gave you the update on Tuesday, but at day end Monday, we had administered 56,785 doses. So even with the fact that Joan's going to mention in a second about how we had to curtail the number of doses given out at the clinic and the community college because of supply issues. Over the course of these 3 days since the last time I updated you, 7,000 more doses vaccine has been given out. And we've seen certainly President Biden, Governor Cuomo, and others talk about an increase in the amount of vaccines that will be made available as we go through March into April. And if we receive more of that, then you're going to see more activity come that follows that. One of the things I want to mention, it was announced by the governor, I think 2 days ago, that there will be another, we'll call it mega site for vaccinations in Westchester County, the county center in White Plains on the White Plains-Greenberg border, being a mega site where you can do well over 1,000 people a day. I think we did 1,800 yesterday, something like that. There'll be a second site of that magnitude sponsored in a partnership between FEMA and the state of New York. So it's a federal-state partnership, and that is targeted for the National Guard Armory on Quincy Place in Yonkers. That's, I guess, considered downtown Yonkers, just north of Getty Square, west side of Yonkers if you need a general geography. And the size and scope of that facility will allow, if it's structured, similar volume of vaccinations to what we're doing at the county center. Significant numbers a day, and that will be a big step forward. I think we all understand that there's going to take a lot of different strategies to get to everybody, and the eligibility has not yet been open to everybody. Right now, you're still dealing with 65 and older, people of any age who have an underlying health condition, and then people in certain occupational cohorts that are considered, quote unquote, essential in the society. Those are the people that are eligible, and that is still well less than 40% of the total population. So when we get more vaccine, we open up those doors to more people. We have a second site that will be significant in Yonkers, probably open in the month of March. And we certainly have talked to municipal officials. Every municipal official in this county, local officials look for opportunities in their home area to open up vaccinations, small centers, large ones, pop-ups, mega, whatever it takes in order to get the population vaccinated. The more vaccinated, the more those active numbers go down. The more the active numbers go down, we assume will follow hospitalizations and fatalities. And that is the strategy. It's not much more complicated than that, but it is an important number of things to open. So look for the big Yonkers site as the next bit of big news. I just want to mention as well, before I ask Joan and then Ken to cover some ground, we're in the process of collecting additional information, statistics on vaccinations, and our intent is to share that information on our Westchester Gov website. The nature of the information is better posted on a website rather than on the dashboard which talks about the infection information, such as we have. We've been through this 100 times. We've asked the state for breakdowns. We have not gotten it, but that, we give you what we have. They've given us breakdown in cases by geography, not hospitalizations and fatalities, so that's what we report on the dashboard. We have put some general vaccination number on the dashboard, but now we have two reports that have just come out that I'm just going to touch on. One is a list by zip code. You can't see it from the camera, but this is a list of all of the communities attached to various zip codes in Westchester County and how many doses have been administered by first dose and how many by second dose. This information comes from the state. It's not generated by us at the county. This, I presume, includes all vaccinations from all different sources because they go into the state system wherever you're vaccinated. And it gives you an idea of how many people have received all of those doses. And as an example, they identify that the number of first doses, and we'll use that as sort of an absolute number. A second dose is a reinforcement, a necessary reinforcement for the people that got the first dose, but the first dose shows the breadth of the number of people that have been vaccinated for at least one. This number shows that there are 121,939 people that have received at least their first dose here in a Westchester County zip code. And that goes from 10501 in Amawalk, which is a section of Yorktown, all the way down to the various zip codes in Yonkers, of which there are quite a few that identify the various sections of Yonkers, 10701 to 10 numbers. The bottom line is that the number of first doses, you'll look at it by community. We'll circulate this online. I'm going to say by Monday it'll be posted on the website. Might be done today, but I don't want to promise it today. We'll promise it before the end of the business day on Monday. I'm looking at Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, across the room. She's nodding her head yes. By the end of the day, Monday, you'll be able to see this document, and then we will update it as we get updated information from the state. Since we don't have the direct information, we can't update it on our own, but as we get new information, we'll update it so you'll be able to see what the geographic spread is. Now, when you look at these numbers, you're going to have 1,000 questions that follow the numbers, which we won't be able to answer to you. We can't tell you why Granite Springs has X and Golden Bridge has Y number of vaccinations. Some of this will be how close a person is to a vaccination site. Some of this will be who managed to get in the system and get the vaccination appointment, which are hard to get. Some of this may be proximity to a pop-up site. Some of this may be proximity to one of the local pharmacies that has it. But whatever it is, you'll see it for yourself because we've promised transparency. We have promised and we've tried to deliver within our ability as much information as we can. So that's one of the groups of statistics you'll see. And then you can look at it, you'll go immediately to your home community and neighboring communities, and you'll get an idea of what's happening in the geographic distribution of doses. We have a second document which we put together, the county government did, and we did it by going to the specific entities that are listed here. And we put a document together based on who has been vaccinated by essential occupation. And at the outset of this, the first 3 occupations that we focused on, first was EMS. They were in the 1A phase. And then the 1B phase opened up to other first responders, which included police and fire. So the documentation we have here will identify police, fire, and EMS individuals and how many of them requested and how many of them received vaccinations. It doesn't have to necessarily be vaccinated by us, but we communicated with each of these different departments. There's quite a lot. I want to thank our team here, headed through Intergov, Steve Bass and Ellen Hendricks, for making the effort to put this together. Kyle McIntyre, one of our new people on board, helped put this together. We had a great assistance from the Real-Time Crime Group under the direction of our Commissioner Sheriff Tom Gleason in the Department of Public Safety to survey and put this together. Brian Hess was a critical person in all of this. And the statistics will show how many people in essential positions in various parts of the counties, broken down by jurisdiction, as to how many of those have done. We'll give you an example of a police department, the North Salem Police Department, Town of North Salem Police Department. Warren Lucas is the supervisor of that town. There were 14 sworn officers in the Town of North Salem Police Department. 12 of them have been vaccinated, and 2 of them are awaiting vaccination. So we know that working through Chief Thomas Howley, we get those other 2 guys vaccinated, and every police officer in North Salem will have been vaccinated. Now, not every department has a 100% desire of the individuals to be vaccinated, because at this point, no one has been mandated to take the vaccine, and you will find that what I've just described as a percentage is a little bit rare, that there are still in most police departments, most fire departments, EMS, not 100% desire. But where there is a willingness to take the vaccine, our ability to administer the vaccine is important. In the village of Ardsley, there are 19 sworn officers. 15 of them have been vaccinated. 2 are awaiting vaccination, which by mathematics tells you there's 2 individuals that choose not to be vaccinated right now. HIPAA laws keep us away from knowing specific individual names. The chiefs of police or the ranking lieutenants of these departments know the individuals, and they take that into account. But we have had in the larger police departments a significant number of people vaccinated. The Yonkers Police Department, which is the largest police department in the county, has had 236 officers vaccinated. Our own Westchester County Department of Public Safety has had 165 officers vaccinated, and there's still some waiting in the queue to continue on. Greenburgh Town has had 55 of their officers vaccinated. Mount Vernon PD, 65 of their people vaccinated. That's on the police side. On the fire and EMS side, similar situation. We'll go back to our friends in North Salem. I'm giving Warren Lucas a shout out today twice. And Warren and I are in different political parties, but at our levels of government, we don't let that thing get in the way of our administration. There are 17 eligible members of the North Salem Volunteer Ambulance Corps. 17 of them wanted the vaccination. 12 of them got it. and the remainder still need to get vaccinated. A couple of them have the first dose, not the second dose, yada, yada. But that's how it rolls. And in a number of these EMS and fire departments, we have a significant number of people who have been vaccinated already. We have completed vaccinations. 75 people of the Mount Kisco Fire Department have had both doses. The New Rochelle Fire Department has had 82 people with both doses. We have let me just take another look here, Scarsdale Fire Department, 80 people in the fire department with both doses. So we're tracking this. This will also be up online so that people can see and see what progress we're making. The individual report is interesting. The update of this report as we go forward is probably more important to see what progress are we making, because we know we need to get the vaccines out to all those who want it in these essential services. We intend to do the same thing with teachers as soon as we have the ability to get that data together. And the teacher vaccination will tie in, certainly in a lot of people's worlds, into reopening schools. But that will be for another discussion once we have that information here. So I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to ask Joan McDonald, our Director of Operations, to tell us a little bit about what we've had to suffer through in terms of weather and the availability of getting the vaccines in, and then our ability to vaccinate people given that. These are difficult operational challenges, and I think when you look at county government, you see a county executive, deputy county executive, we talk general policy. There are people with the talent and skill, Joan and her team, she'll identify those people who have to actually implement the things we're talking about, and it's not easy to do it. You got a snowstorm going out there, and you may or may not have the vaccines coming in, and how we get that done. So, Joan, would you please give us a quick update?
Thank you, George. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about the vaccine distribution in two buckets. The first bucket is the county center bucket, which is run by the state of New York in partnership with the county and with the Westchester Medical Center. That facility is receiving the Pfizer vaccine. The vaccine that the county is receiving for our clinic right here in White Plains, and that we set up a second site at the community college, is the Moderna vaccine. This week, even though when we look at weather events, we keep it very localized, I think we've all seen on the national news that there has been an extended weather event throughout the country over the last week. That weather event has affected the distribution of the Moderna vaccine. We traditionally get the Moderna vaccine, our allotment, every Tuesday. It is shipped directly from one of the Moderna manufacturers in Tennessee. So we get those doses on Tuesday, and then we go ahead and do the first vaccines at the community college and the second vaccines at our clinic. That allocation was disrupted this week, not only for Westchester County, but for almost every county throughout our state. What that has meant is we unfortunately have had to cancel and are in the process of rescheduling second doses and some first doses. So we still have not been informed when we are going to be receiving this week's allocation, and we are hopeful that we get double, that we get this week's allocation and next week's allocation sometime over the weekend or on Tuesday, so we can go full speed ahead and get the doses in arms, the vaccines in arms. What that has meant from a numbers perspective is it's approximately 1,000 second doses that we are in the process of rescheduling right now. An additional 600 people should have been receiving their second doses Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday of next week, so we are juggling that. In addition, we were scheduled to receive 1,100 doses for essential personnel. As George mentioned, those firefighters, police officers. We were hoping to do a significant number of teachers this week because this is the midwinter break for many schools, and that was our plan. Unfortunately, as the phrase goes, the best laid plans. We were also scheduled to receive approximately 1,600 what are called supplemental doses, which were for those individuals with comorbidity and some of the congregate care facilities here in the county. And we had made arrangements to get those doses for comorbidity to some of our federally qualified health centers, Sun River, Open Door, and the Mount Vernon Health Center, and give some of those doses to the medical centers so that they could start vaccinating people with comorbidity. Unfortunately, all of those initiatives and all of those vaccines for this week have been put on hold. But one of the things we have learned through the last 12 months of this pandemic is how to be flexible and how to pivot. So our team, the operations team, Emily Saltzman, Aviva Meyer, plus the great leadership at the health department, Dr. Amler and Renee Recchia, the first deputy commissioner there, are looking at how we can double up, triple up, do whatever we need to do so that we can, get those second doses in people who we need to reschedule from this week, continue on the second doses next week, and do the 1,100 essential workers, plus we're hopeful that we get another 1,100 next week, and get those doses in people's arms to continue to increase the numbers for the Westchester County residents. It takes a lot of planning. But we've been successful to date, and we are optimistic that once these doses come in, we will get people back into the community college and our clinic right here in White Plains to get first doses and second doses in arms and continue on the path that we're on.
Thank you very much, Joan, and we're deeply indebted to Joan McDonald and her leadership and the team that she leads here in our executive quarters. Joan's right hand is Deputy Director of Operations Emily Saltzman. She's been benefited by the assistance of Christopher Steers, who has joined us in the last 2 months in a top administrative position. He's been working on these projects under Joan and Emily as partners, and also Susan Spear, who has been here and now is the Deputy Commissioner of Emergency Services, and she's been directly involved in these, and many other people that Joan pointed out who are worthy of thanks and praise. But I want to thank you publicly, Joan, for what you've done. This is a very difficult environment in order to operate. And I know that if you get on a line at the county center and you see a long line, your first reaction is these idiots in government don't know what they're doing. How can they have us out here in a long line? What you may not know is the things that Jones just pointed out. When we have to reschedule people at whatever location it is, and we already have a group of people scheduled, the people who are already scheduled, if that's all we had to do for the day, there'd be no lines. And then we've gone through many, many days at the county center and the clinic and now at the community college with no lines at all. But when we have to reschedule people and put them back into and add to the existing mix of people, we're now cramming more people into a defined amount of time slots. And by the way, when you have to administer the Moderna shot 4 weeks after the first shot, you don't have 2 weeks to play with to reschedule. You know that you've got a condensed time frame, and the Pfizer shot I think is 3 weeks, and that is a requirement that medical science places on us. So operationally, it snows, it doesn't snow, it doesn't matter. You need the shot within that time frame, and so Joan and the people I've mentioned have had to try to figure that out in real time, and we appreciate what they've done. So if you do find yourself with a 3 o'clock appointment and a threat of snow or rain or something you don't like, and you show up at 10 o'clock in the morning, you will most likely be on a line because you and people like you are coming at a time frame separate from when you were scheduled, and there has to go through that sequence. And what you don't know, and I may not even know at the time, is how many other people we've had to additionally schedule into the slot because we had to compensate for the times where we couldn't give out their shots for the reasons you've just mentioned. So do understand that to the extent that it's possible. We're not perfect. We're not geniuses. We don't purport to be, the greatest thing that you've ever seen. But we're not idiots either. We're trying to figure it out just like you are in your personal life. When your kids come to you and say, Mom, Dad, can we do this thing? And you say, no, I can't. They're upset about it, but they don't necessarily know the dynamics of what they're asking for. You do. You're the adult. You're trying to figure out whether you can satisfy what your child wants or not. We don't think that people are unreasonable in what they want, but our ability to deliver it has to deal with other factors that we don't control all of, some of which Joan has just pointed out. So I know Joan's got other things to do. Thank you very much, Joan, for being with us today. Now I want to turn to our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins. Ken is a man of many talents. As I have, he, at a different era, chaired the Board of Legislators, which is in and of itself a pretty difficult responsibility. He's headed an IDA board and other things. Today he is the weatherman. I've asked him to talk a little bit about the weather, because weather has been an intrinsic issue now that we have to deal with. And we're not going to try to predict what the weather is going to be, but at least to put some parameters out there and then to tie it one more time through about what you have to do as an individual in order to do your best to get a vaccine shot. We are clear that we do not have enough product. I'm not going to go back to that cookie thing again, but we don't have enough product to be able to provide it easily for everybody when they need it, when they demand it. And we're further now complicated by weather as we look prospectively. So, Ken, please give us an update on what's ahead.
Thanks, George. One of the things, again, as a new meteorologist has told us all, we are currently in the midst of a winter weather advisory. So we're going to have that happen until 7 p.m. tonight, which this particular weather pattern is around the entire country. All of us know by seeing what's happening down in Texas with all of the freezing weather and the snow that it's a significant concern. Here in Westchester, we're going to have a light snow, freezing rain that continues county-wise till, again, about 7 p.m. tonight is the winter weather advisory. The challenge, again, for our utility folks, the Con Ed folks, there were 3 outages early. In NYSEG, the New York State Electric and Gas, had 0 outages. So that's not the particular issue. But tying into what the county executive was pointing out, and what Joe McDonald referenced in her comments as well, the weather has impacted tremendously this distribution of vaccine, and therefore people are making choices. And the choice that you make to come early to your 3 o'clock appointment at 10 o'clock in the morning can cause significant challenges and delays. Yesterday, for example, at the county center, and the county executive continues to point out, Joe McDonald pointed out, we're our partners with the state. It is a state-run facility. There's a vendor that runs the facility and does the vaccinations, which is the medical center that does the vaccinations. The Parks Department staff helps clean up the outside. The Health Department folks managing it, and with Susan Spear and Emergency Services, which are Whitney and Chris Steers, and all those folks doing all that work in a partnership and working together. Is if you come early and the line starts going around the block like it was yesterday morning when we came up to the county office building to do the work that we have to do, we saw those lines and they were significant. The people there worked tremendously hard, making sure that people that had appointments were moving through, but more importantly, the folks that had later appointments did get through eventually, and by the afternoon there was no line at all. But the fact of the matter is, please keep in mind the weather pattern should not necessarily impact your ability to get a vaccination at a site or testing at a site. You should pay attention to the websites, the westchestergov.com, and certainly to the state site if there's challenges and changes to the appointment schedule. But again, the vaccine center has been open, as the county executive pointed out, even through the storm, the biggest storm. It did close the following day, and making sure that we get those vaccines out. But right now, the issue is still the distribution and the supply. Continuing on with our weather for just a minute, a Beeline and a paratransit stops are really close to schedule. There's only one route right now, which is Route 9, which is on its standard snow detour. Route 9 happens to go through a bit of hilly areas, so they have an emergency snow route that's already mapped out. And please continue to pay attention to westchestergov.com. We do have that Beeline information on our website. There is also a call-in number that you can have, and I'm sure, knowing the wonderful team in comms, that they're popping up that information on the screen as we're speaking. There's always delays, weather delays, whenever you have an ice storm specifically, because it's freezing rain. For us, it was snow yesterday early and nice and fluffy for all of us that were out there shoveling. But But then overnight, we got that freezing rain and an ice coat over that. And the county executive said, do exactly what your mom always said to do. Make sure that you're prepared. Gas up the car. Dad might have said that. Making sure that you have your charged utilities, your phone, your cell phone. Keep water and some snacks in the car, and make sure that we continue to do that. So if you are traveling by airline, check with your carrier as normal. But again, it is so important for everyone to realize, do not just make changes up on your own to be able to say, I'm going to come early because I want to make sure to get that vaccine. The vaccination center, all of those individuals that are there, those essential workers that are there, they are trying extremely hard to get everyone through. No one wants to make someone wait out in the snow or in the cold, etc. And that's basic, the queuing techniques that are there, trying to get people through. So if you have an appointment at a time, please try to stay as close to your appointment as possible. If you don't have an appointment at all, it's not the time to just show up. Or everyone needs an appointment, whether you have a comorbidity, whether you're in 1A or 1B. If you don't have an appointment, do not show up at one of those sites. The new sites, as the county executive pointed out, is the same exact thing. The sites are going to be outlined and said what people are going to be eligible for that. New York State continues to give us that direction and set those standards. So again, the weather is certainly a concern for us. We have another couple of storms that are coming up. It is the winter time. We live in the Northeast. We really need to be, since we've been spoiled over the past couple of years with a lack of snow, we're getting back to a kind of a normal winter pattern when there's a quick snowstorm that comes through. We know how to handle it because we're New York tough. Thanks a lot, Judge.
Thank you. A few more things, which will take us probably to the full hour here, we hope will be helpful. There was an article in the New York Times, which I caught today, which I thought really bears a quick mention. And that focuses on an attitude that a number of us have about dealing with these vaccines. I'm just going to read it the way it was written. The coronavirus vaccines are not 100% effective. Vaccinated people may still be contagious. And the virus warrants with various variants, and those variants may make things worse. So don't change your behavior, even if you get a shot. A lot of this message, and some of it is based in truth, but is fundamentally misleading. The evidence so far suggests that the proper doses of the vaccine, with a waiting period after the second shot, both shots now have to be administered, effectively eliminates the risk of COVID-19 death. Eliminates the risk of COVID-19 death. And it nearly eliminates the risk of hospitalization, and it dramatically reduces the likelihood that you will infect somebody else. Those things are true from the scientific community. Now, it may be that you might get COVID, but you'd get a mild form of it, something that looks a lot more like the common cold or a bad cold that you might have. But unfortunately, there's a sense of alarmism that comes in, certainly with something new. And we're living in a world where when you go on the internet, you can read anything under the sun. People will post anything. There's no way to verify if it's true or not true, how much of it is opinion, how much of it is fact. And it can undermine the desire or the willingness of people to take the vaccines. There is no other way. There is no other way out of this pandemic right now other than the vaccine. We do not have effective antiviral treatment, and that's being researched by medical science, something to treat you with when you get the disease. And you may remember that there was a viral antiviral cocktail that was created that you could take early in your infection period that might help you recover faster. But it's not a cure. It's not available widely yet. So you're really dealing with the vaccination process as being our ticket out of the dance. If you're tired of wearing a mask, if you're tired of not being able to go into a restaurant or going into a restaurant at small capacity and you're eating indoors and you're worried about it, none of the normalcy of life is going to come if we don't appreciate what the vaccines are, which is medical science's rather fast response, but effective response to this pandemic. Would we have preferred that we didn't have these vaccines? Would we prefer that we were still sitting in late October, where all we had were masks and social distancing and hand sanitizing, and that was the whole way we fought this? And the numbers would just continue to grow whenever the circumstances put us indoors and put us in greater risk of the virus. So I think it's very frustrating for me to read stories that show high percentage of people that just won't take the vaccine. No one is going to force you at this stage of the game to do something you don't want to do. But as I said before, when we talked before Thanksgiving and Christmas and the exhortation, please don't do risky behavior. Use your good. And a number of people followed it, a number of people didn't. And we saw a demonstrable increase in the infection because some number of people just wouldn't do it. You're a free American. Do whatever you want to do. Fine. Do it your way. But the do it your way has given us 25% of all the deaths we had from Thanksgiving Day to now. And when I read the article in the New York Times and I see all of this, the rhetoric and the defense of why I'm not going to take a vaccine, and I can even see in these statistics that we're pointing that we track how many people requested the vaccine or were willing to take the vaccine in these various positions and how many we delivered. But there's still a significant cohort, depending on which jurisdiction and which area you're looking at, of people that don't want to take the vaccine. I don't know what's in it. I'm not sure. What's the long-term effects? I don't believe in vaccinations. This is part of a conspiracy. The government wants to take. I don't care what your reasoning is. Whatever your reasoning is, you don't take the vaccine, you run the higher risk of the disease. You run the higher risk of the disease hitting you more severely. And if you are 30 years old and the healthiest person on the planet, you may not get the disease. But you may not. It may not make you suffer when you get the disease, but you are contagious to other people. And some of the people you come in contact with, the touching of a surface that somebody else touches, could wind up being them contracting the disease. Or when you're in a setting, you're stopping to pay at a counter and you cough, the person behind you might be vulnerable. Might be vulnerable because they have an underlying health condition. They don't look like they're sick, but they have asthma or some other breathing respiratory disease. You don't know, and I don't know. I'm frustrated in that there's still an unwillingness of people to do what we know is the logical thing to do, and we go out of our way to find excuses for not doing it. And it really mystifies me. And again, we're not going to send the thought police to come to your house, knock on your door. That's not what we're going to do. Not Westchester County. That's not where we're at. We're going to appeal to your better angels, to your logic, to the things that you do in other parts of your life. You make intelligent decisions in other parts of your life. You have to apply those intelligent decisions here. If you don't know how much money is in your bank account, you don't write a check for a high amount because you run the risk of bouncing the check and putting yourself in jeopardy. It's smart not to write a check that you don't have the money in the bank to cover. That's what you do. And similarly, you make an intelligent decision in this area. That information is very frustrating to me to read, and I hope that you take it to heart, not because I tell you, because you sit in the privacy of your own time with the people that you love around you. If you have a significant other in your life, talk it through over a cup of coffee yourselves. But think clearly about a society that is already now on the verge of a one-year anniversary of this pandemic. We're not out of the pandemic yet, and the path out of the pandemic leads through vaccination and making yourself less vulnerable to getting the disease in the first place. And some cohort of Americans don't want to take the vaccine for whatever reason that is. And the death toll, is not going to flatten out just by the same behavior that we've led up to now. I do want to mention that we have an event coming up on March 3rd within the same area. It is the one-year anniversary of the first case of COVID. This is nothing to celebrate. This is a commemoration. It's a very sober gathering. We're going to lower flags in Westchester County to half-staff for the week of February 28th, which will go through the March 3rd date. We lowered the flags originally when we first had our COVID deaths. The state came in and lowered all flags. The county can only govern flags on county-owned property. So here and in other county buildings, we can't dictate flags in private use. The state can, and so can the federal government. And so they came in and they put all flags at half-staff, and they kept it for much longer time. And then they lifted that order. Flags went back to normal. We're going to lower them for the week, February 28th through March 3rd, on county-owned facilities, and we invite you to do the same thing as a sign of remembrance to the 2,000-plus people we've lost. And dear God, in the time between now and March 3rd, may we lose no one else, but we fear that we will, and that the number that I gave you today is just going to be a portion of the ultimate number when we have the ceremony. At 11 o'clock that morning, we will have an interfaith prayer vigil here at the county office building, 148 Martine Avenue. By 12 noon, we'll have a moment of silence countywide, and then there'll be ringing of bells across the county because we want to remember those we've lost. We are not a hard-hearted people. This is not statistics. This is not just, politics. This is human loss and human grieving, and we have to grieve with those who have lost if we're to make any sense out of this experience we're going through. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going to have an across-the-board applause for first responders. That's something that's been out in the marketplace now for quite a while. I've seen it in a number of communities. People, just come out to their front step and they applaud. And the first responders, the people who've been on the front lines of this, certainly the hospital workers, nurses, and so forth, and then others as well, EMS and fire department people as well, let them know how much we appreciate the sacrifice they've made and how important that sacrifice is. I want to touch on one other point, and then I want to end on a rather upbeat point before we go to questions. And Catherine Chaffee will have some questions for us, I'm sure. I want to talk about Texas very briefly. I worked for a corporation in my private professional life for 11 years that was based just north of Houston. So I had reason to go to Texas quite a bit in that era. That era also overlaps when I served on the Rye City Council, a little bit of my time here in the County Board of Legislators. And my responsibilities based in New York as National Director of Sales for the company. This is where the market base was in the Northeast. However, corporate headquarters in Houston, I'd have to travel there. So I was in Texas a fair bit. And I traveled around the state to some extent, Dallas, Galveston, El Paso, you name it. What Texas is going through now is a flat-out tragedy. And I want to highlight that this is a moment where New Yorkers should focus on one thing, and that is what can we do to help our fellow Americans who live in Texas. There are organizations right now that are having clothing drives, blanket drives, contribution drives. As long as they're reputable organizations, we encourage you to help our fellow Americans in Texas. We have gotten into a bad place in this country, maybe the last 20 years or so, talking about red states and blue states. By that language, New York is a solid blue state, and Texas is a solid red state. And there were times over the last 4 years where I heard an unwillingness to help California because California was a blue state having wildfires. But when Florida, a red state, got hit by a hurricane, let's do everything we can. I wiped that off the page. When a tragedy hits Florida, we help them. When a tragedy hits California, we help them. When a tragedy hits Texas, we help them. Now, I know from being in Texas a lot, and the senior management of the company that I work for were Texans, there's a very strong individual streak in Texas. There's a strong individual streak in Alaska, if you've ever been there, or Maine. California has a very good sense of themselves as Californians. Speak to people in Louisiana. They have a sense of who they are as Louisianans. And certainly us New Yorkers are not exactly wallflowers. Each of us have our own sense of our importance and our uniqueness, and Texans certainly feel that sense of pride and independence. But it is a reality that we are all dependent at various times. And this is not the first time Texas has gone through a crisis. When Hurricane Katrina hit, we know of its impact on New Orleans. It also hit East Texas pretty significantly. And Hurricane Harvey hit the Gulf Coast between Corpus Christi and Houston. Go run to Galveston. Go run to the directory and see the geography. Because I've had national director of sales responsibilities, I have a pretty good idea of the geography of the country. But Texans are Americans. They are our brothers and sisters. And if certain public officials in Texas weren't sympathetic about New York, forget that stuff. That's not important. What's important is that we're all Americans. And Texans right now are suffering. And who's ever to blame for the suffering, that can happen in the political world. But let's show compassion to fellow Americans. Let's do that with a spirit, the same spirit that we want to see directed to us when misfortune comes to our doorstep. Because it is true that misfortune will come to our doorstep in some way, shape, or form. It'll happen a year, happen in 10 years. It's happened already on 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, we turned to the rest of the nation. Big, strong, economically powerful New York, intellectual, financial capital of the country, we were in need. Most people responded. Some didn't, but don't worry about that. We have to do what's right, not pay back or have a sense of revenge or any of that other stuff. Help your fellow American who happens to be in Texas, who is suffering a terrible thing. That could happen to us. And if it does, we'll want compassion. So show compassion in order for us to someday, when we need it, receive compassion. I want to close with an upbeat comment. We have made a number of different announcements. Some of them we've done here. We've introduced you to some new members of our team. Lisa Reyes, who's part of our communications team, joined us within the last month. And Andre Early, Deputy Commissioner of Recreation and Parks, has joined us. We had him here. The promotions of Blanca Lopez and other individuals, Martha Lopez. We've spotlighted these people, A, because they deserve attention for what they do here in the administration. As I've often said, I get too much credit, probably too much blame for what happens, and not enough credit goes to the people that deserve the credit. Diane Atkins is on our executive team. She's a director of program and policy, and she's using the experience that she had for many years in the Department of Social Services, where she previously served as first deputy commissioner, the number 2 job in by far the largest department of county government, and arguably the most complicated of county government. In her responsibilities, Director of Human Services responsibilities here, she oversees DSS, the Department of Senior Programs and Services, the Youth Bureau, Veterans Affairs, and she's just a terrific person. She's smart, she's tough, and she's really a perfect example of a person who's given her life to public service. We have a little video that I want you to see about Diane Atkins and why we're spotlighting her.
Hi, I'm Diane Atkins. I am the Director of Human Services under George Latimer. It's truly a great profession that I chose, or chose me. I don't know how I got here. But I am the first in my family, my immediate family, to have a college degree. And when I first started at Social Services, the director of that program pulled me aside and said, you need to go back and get your degree. So I was married, 2 children, full-time job. And I went back to college at night. Having children is probably the best part of my life, of course. To give them a perspective, I would say to them, always be kind to people, because you just never know the struggles that they may have. In the early 80s, that's when rap was really getting started, and there were 3 of us. My kids found us a DJ. Stay in school, stay off drugs, so we did a lot of educational stuff, but put it to hip hop. Many people think about social services as being welfare, just public assistance, food stamps, Medicaid. But I got to work in employment, I got to work in housing, different government parts. It was a great sense of satisfaction. In each one of those jobs that I had, it just made me better for the next job. I was fortunate enough to be asked to come and join George Latimer's staff. And so this has been a privilege. He's from Mount Vernon. He's from the south side of Mount Vernon. I live in Mount Vernon. I graduated from Mount Vernon High School. So he understands who you look like doesn't stop you from being where you should be. In DSS, we have 3 deputy commissioners, African American. Senior programs, we have an African American commissioner. In the beginning, when I went to Child Protective Services, there were very few people that looked like me. The children and the families that we served looked like me, but we didn't have the staff that looked like me. And when I left as the first Black woman to ever reach First Deputy Commissioner.
We're very proud of Diane Atkins. We're very appreciative that she's part of our team. And we invite any of you that are interested in being part of the team here in Westchester County government. We have information on the screen that will tell you where you want to respond to, that will help you determine whether or not there's an opportunity for you to bring your skills into county government. We try very hard to bring together talented people. We've tried to attract talented people. We brought back some people who have served in county government previously. And 4 years ago, when I first took office, I maintained quite a few of the leaders of the various departments who my predecessor had, because I wanted to try to create an environment where people would contribute to the running of the government without worrying about the politics of it. We're often called politicians in this business, and it's a little frustrating when you hear it, because everything we've talked about in this hour plus has to do with government. It doesn't have to do with how do you get a vote. It has to do with how do you go about doing the job that we have responsibilities for. And that's what makes us public officials. There is a time and a place for campaigning. It is not in this format. There's another format for that. But I always try to encourage that people to look at us not through the light of the political party that you're in or just what happens in the last few weeks of a campaign when things start to fly around, but understand that this is about governing to provide certain services to people all across the community. And that's what we're trying to do from COVID and the other things we touch on in these updates. And hopefully, we can deal with these problems and then move on, because there'll be new problems that we'll face. But we'd like to put these ones behind us, certainly COVID, and do everything we can to do our job. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Catherine Chaffee.
Yes, the first question comes from Eric Feldman from News 12. He asks, AARP New York reports less than half of their members surveyed could make a successful COVID-19 vaccine appointment. His question is, why are so many New Yorkers continuing to have trouble getting appointments, and what is the county doing to help make the process easier?
Well, Eric Feldman from News 12 asked that question. The first thing is that what I'm sure they're referring to is the difficulty that many seniors have in navigating the electronic method by which you set up an appointment. Part of it because there aren't enough appointments available. I've touched that already, the lack of vaccines. If there are not guaranteed vaccines, appointments can't be set up. And some of it because of the computer skills you need to navigate the program. If you're accustomed to being online and going through questions, that's one thing, but there are many folks out there, particularly under the AARP banner, people who don't have the computer skills, don't have access to a computer. In terms of assisting seniors, we have had work through our Department of Senior Services, May Carpenter, a program by which individuals who have those skills can be linked to the seniors that are necessary to register to get online. They can access that information, go to our website, and we'll provide you information there. Now, go to your website for the person who isn't online is a problem. How do we reach those seniors? We try to do that through the various local senior programs. We had a conference call a month ago with all of the different senior programs, and we know that in a variety of communities that they have tasked their senior program directors with reaching out to the seniors that are within their scope to offer those services locally and also through the county to try to help those people negotiate it. But we must remember that the overall system of registration comes through the state of New York. They've created the system. We follow it, we work with it, and we try to the extent that we can, implement whatever there is. If there are changes that need in the system, those changes have to come through the state, Eric. They're not within the county's control and authority. When you look at the actual vaccination distributions, the state has identified that the local pharmacies are the major points for reaching seniors, people 65 years of age and older. But again, they've been given a limited amount of doses, and so they're reaching out proactively to their list of seniors who are, regular users of a particular pharmacy, is how most of those doses get allocated. We are awaiting the moment at which the state gives authority for there to be a mobile vaccination unit. We know that there are seniors that not only need the vaccine but cannot leave their houses. It's not a matter of preferentiality. I'd rather get it at home rather than go out of the house. These are people who are homebound or bedridden and need to be vaccinated to protect against this disease. And as soon as we get some authority, we're in a capacity to be able to do that. Or if the state decides to do it through existing organizations like Visiting Nurse Services or various other home health agencies, they may choose to do vaccine distribution that way. The county will be ready to do in-home, homebound vaccination once we're given an allocation and an authority to go ahead and do that in both of those cases to reach the hard-to-reach seniors that are out there.
The next question comes from Mark Lingriello from the Journal News. He asks, just before the pandemic hit, the county released a study showing a need for 11,700 new housing units. You said at the time it was a crisis in every corner of the county. Have you found COVID exacerbated the housing problem? And is the county taking steps to change its approach as a result?
Well, Mark Longriello from LOHUD asked that question. The crisis continues. The COVID impact has been dramatic. It has thrown a host of different things into different circumstances. Any of the affordable housing, or for that matter, any of the essential housing projects that were underway were continuing, but those that hadn't started yet really ran into the problem of banks or other financing entities being unwilling, not knowing the instability of the society, to finance new projects. It's become very difficult to launch a new project over the last year or so. So you've seen that now the 34 units in Portchester done by Laz Development on South Regent Street, that's one of the projects we've helped funded. People have moved into that facility. I think they're almost all staffed up. The 74 units over in Greenburgh that was once the West Help project, they're on the cusp now of renting everybody into those units. Those are existing projects that happened beforehand. Projects that had approvals prior to that are underway. But starting new ones are very difficult. So it means we're still well short of what we need to do to address the 11,000 need. Right now, I'd say we're working on, in some degree of action, in the vicinity of about 1,500 housing units across the county, but in different buckets where either financing has been identified, but not all the approvals have been given, where in some cases the county has allocated a certain amount of money, earmarked a certain amount of money, but we're still waiting for the state to come through, the feds. and there's a host of different reasons why each project is at where it's at. We keep track of those things on a monthly basis, and pushing a peanut with your nose, you go through this. Our outreach effort to the various municipalities continues, even during the pandemic. We've seen some progress just this past week in the village of Croton-on-Hudson, where they approved an affordable housing project that is going to come to the county for some financing. We've seen the village of Bronxville adopt a model zoning ordinance, which advantages the issue of affordable housing, Bronxville being one of the communities that were part of the housing settlement that dates back over 10 years ago. So, we've made small progress on this, but no one is going to say that everything hasn't been affected by COVID. Every single initiative that we had hoped to execute at this point has been slowed down by COVID. Our efforts to have an airport master plan slowed down by COVID. We can't have public forums and hearings the way we'd like to. Not everybody gets on a Zoom meeting, and you want to do something that significant with full public input, not just the people who live right by the airport, but people all across the county. So that has been slow walked until we have a different climate and environment. There's a host of other things that fit into that category. But yes, COVID has had an impact. But yes, we're moving forward to do as much as we can, as fast as we can. And I think it represents, as it always is, at the end of any administrative term, or this administrative term comes to an end December 31st, there will be things yet undone that we would hope to see done in the future beyond that.
Okay. The next question comes from Gary Stern, and this is the final question. Gary Stern from the Journal News. Can I ask what schools will have to do to fully reopen if the state maintains the 6-foot rule for social distancing?
Well, Gary Stern, who covers education issues with LOHUD, and Gary and I have had a lot of dialogue during my state Senate years when I was the ranking minority member on the Senate Education Committee. Now, Gary, of course, in this role in the county government, our role with the school districts are pretty prescribed. We have 2 or 3 areas that we're trying to be helpful in. The state has established rules, and they recently, just as recently as a couple of days ago, the New York State Assembly members' delegation from Westchester queried the state to clarify what the authority was, and that identified response said that there would be no changes in the rules, that there are some flexibility in the rules, but the rules still have to be met within certain parameters. The 6-foot distancing or less than that with barriers. And the institution of barriers now depends on the physical logistics of each individual school district. There are a number of school districts that are fully back in session, and I presume what they've been able to do is overcome the 6-foot distance issue, either because they had more space to work with or the way they reallocated space to be able to accommodate their classes. Some schools can do that, some can't, and it depends on, you might be able to do it in a couple of school buildings. If you have 5 elementaries in your district or 15 elementary schools in your district and you can do it at 3, you can't bring back 3 elementary schools. You got to bring back all elementary schools in your district, so it makes it more complicated. The county's role in this is twofold. What the county can do, number one, is what we're trying to do as best as we can, and that is to vaccinate every teacher in Westchester County that wants a vaccination. And we believe if we can get through that cohort, and it's a huge number of people, but if we can get through that cohort, we will provide an opportunity for the teachers and the teachers union to be able to feel more comfortable about going back to full-time schooling. And then the second thing that we do is we have the availability for the county health department to be consulted with by the various school districts to work with the local school districts on whatever the plan is to implement whatever is a plan that satisfies the state rule. But understand, and this was clarified by the state assembly members in their communications with the state, that it is a state rule and that the local school district, which has the power to reopen, does that in consultation with parents, teachers, and the county health department. It is not the county health department's authority to close it or to open it, but to consult with it to try to get to the practices that would allow it to be most healthy and flexible in these things. And unfortunately, when you have difficult issues, oftentimes what happens is people try to throw other people under the bus so that it's not them being responsible for the ultimate decision. I believe as a matter of public policy that all of our schools should be open. I believe that education is not as adequate as it can be if children aren't in classrooms. I believe that. That's my sense of it. I know that when we shut down the schools last year, the whole of society was shut down. People weren't going to work. We closed the whole industry world. Now that the industry world has been open, parents go back to work. Who watches the children? And how do those parents basically help kids if they have 3 kids at 3 different grade levels at the same time while they're sitting at home remote learning. It's a very difficult task. And it's not that the school districts aren't trying very hard to satisfy that task. It's just a very hard task. And I personalize it. When I was in 3rd grade, it was all I could do to pay attention to the teacher. You know, and if I'm home in front of a computer screen with a dog running around the house, you know, I could just imagine how difficult it is to get a kid at a certain level to focus. So, but I do believe as a public policy matter, opening the schools are something we have to strive for. However, in order to open the schools, we have to make sure that we're protecting people's safety. And that's why within our lane, what we can do with our allocation of vaccine is to try to get as many of the, and it's not just teachers, it's school employees, cafeteria workers, maintenance people, anybody who's going to be in contact with each other that could in theory spread the virus, to get as many of those people vaccinated as possible. And that is fully within our scope. You can't expect teachers or parents or the school administration to do the administration of vaccine. The county's trying to be able to do that, and it's a massive task. There are more teachers in this county by far than there are police, fire, and EMS added together. By far, many more teachers than those other 3 categories put together. In terms of the public health department is there to work with, consult with, and give advice, and where we can, other assistance to make sure that the setting is safe. But it requires the local school district, school board, administrator, school superintendent, working with the parents and their teachers to work through the game plan. And the county comes in as an asset to help that process happen. And I know, you know, you'll get certain comments when somebody asks one of the key health department officials and they'll opine about something. Well, that's an opinion given to answer a question. That's not a policy implementation element. The policy implementation element is for our DOH to work with those school districts to try to help them comply. That's our mission. But we are not the main player in the game. We are a player in the game. And our commitment is to try to do what we can within our lane to help make that decision to open schools more possible. And I recognize we're in late February. I know when the school season ends in June. We went through this with high school sports, went through that process, and it was a little bumpy, and people, you know, on internet and all that stuff, we got through it. And we'll get through this as well, and we will do our job within that parameter. With that, there are no other questions. You're welcome to reach out to Catherine Chaffee, communications@westchestergov.com. For those in the press, a very long update. I apologize for the length of time, but hopefully we touched on some important issues. We gave you a full understanding of where we are with the virus, with the vaccines. We touched on a couple of the factors of what we're dealing with, gave a little weather report, and talked a little bit about our mindset toward what's happening in Texas, which we think is important, and then also a salute to Diane Atkins for the person that she is, and also as she represents so many other good county employees. So we wish you a good and safe weekend. We will see you back here on Monday at 2 o'clock, give you an update. Hopefully the numbers will continue to go in the right direction, downward for virus, upward for vaccination. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you very much. Have a great day.